French Revolution, starring my main man, Marquis de Lafayette. So Lafayette's a French nobleman. He helps with the American Civil War. He's very into like all these Enlightenment ideals, but I have to pause the recording now because my auntie's here. Okay, we're back, and we now have 18 minutes of footage left to continue this extravaganza. Okay, well, where was I? Lafayette, yeah, he was a nobleman, a general, and he was really into the Enlightenment, and he helped out with the American Civil War, but that's sort of secondary. Lafayette's important because he represented a trend in the nobility towards sympathizing with the bourgeoisie, which is the working class sort of people. The kind of people that back then would have had, there would have been no sympathy for them. So to set the stage, France is poor as shit because they've funded this American Revolution. The King Louis the something, who cares, is building this palace at Versailles, which is still the largest, like, greatest palace ever or whatever. But he's taking his country and driving it to bankruptcy to build this palace. And so, because his country's going bankrupt, he calls a meeting of the Estates General, and that the Estates General is like a parliament, but because France is an absolute monarchy, it doesn't use the parliament, but they still have it. And it's made up of 3 estates. The first estate is the clergy. Special note, the clergy is higher than the nobles because the clergy is actually what gives the king its power, because the king is, once again, God's chosen representative. The second is the nobility. Notability, get it? Marquis de Lafayette, who I'll get back to later. And the third is the bourgeoisie and the peasantry. And what pretty much happens is that, like, I think the third estate has a disagreement with the king, and because a lot of the nobility sympathize with them, they sort of have, like, the power over the Estates General. So the king locks them out of the room that they're making decisions in, and says, like, if you can't form up, you can't make any decisions, Lamau. And so they just go to a different room and decide that, they wouldn't rest until they had built, like, a French constitution, to have a constitutional monarchy instead of like a theocratic absolute monarchy. And they arrest the king. Marquis de Lafayette himself is leading the procession that arrested the king to something they were taking him to. And another notable thing they did in the French Revolution, in this year, which is 1789, they stormed the Bastille for arms, because all of this coincides with the general population uprising, which is why the Third Estate has so much power. And that populational uprising is inspired by the views of the Enlightenment and people like Lafayette, which demands, like, humanitarianism. And it's also inspired by the fact that the country's poor, they have no money, and they just had a really bad, like, weather set that ruined all their crops, so they're all starving. And so they revolt for food, and they take the weapons from the Bastille, and, like, they do shenanigans with the king when there's an army, like, right there that's not helping the king. And, like, a big reason it all worked at all was because Lafayette's a general, and he's supposed to be a general of the king. But if he goes against the king, like, a lot of the French army is going to go with Lafayette, you know? But the question with the French Revolution, because it's seen as really revolutionary, like it's the big one about modern ideals, right? But in that year, 1789, did they really change history? All they did was arrest a king and storm the Bastille. One of the arguments is that it is because by punishing their God-given righted king, their absolute monarch, they are creating an example for the rest of Europe to follow, and that is scary for, like, because pretty much every single nation in Europe is ruled in that way. And before then, nobody had thought that they could be disposed of. Except for over 100 years earlier, when Charles was executed. Like, it's not a good argument, because Charles is the one that set the example. And the rest of it, all the humanitarian stuff, it's just the Enlightenment made flesh. So the French Revolution isn't a big turning point. The Enlightenment as a whole is. And the Enlightenment took span across over 100 years, from the late 1700s and the American Revolution right through the 1800s. One of the big challenges for me in writing this essay is going to be convincing people that the French Revolution isn't that important in the face of the Enlightenment as a whole. I think that public subconscious opinion is far more important than the actions that we actually see, and that's what made the Enlightenment more important than the French Revolution as an expression of the Enlightenment. And then there's the one about Napoleon, about how amazing it is that he put in the metric system. But, like, any system of measurement we use doesn't matter. It's just a number game. Like, you can convert meters to feet and inches. Like, the fact that it makes more sense as base 10 is made redundant by the fact that everything would make more sense as base 12. And it's such a small thing. And then after Napoleon, they just go back to a monarchy again. But, special note here, this time the monarchy is a constitutional monarchy. It's what those revolutionaries in 1789 wanted in the first place. And it took a long time to happen. And by the time it did happen, it wasn't what the people wanted. The people wanted a full-on republic by then. Well, some of the people. But they got the constitutional monarchy, so